Please stay tuned for our next segment, where we will discuss the importance of protecting the drag community and our trans siblings from a psychological analysis and explore some of the mental health effects that these laws have on children and young adults. Now watch this.
You're a Scorpio. Say I control you, but maybe I don't. Say what you want, but I'm a Scorpio.
Hello, Safe Schools Leadership Summit. My name is Joey Young. I'm a queer male singer-songwriter from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My pronouns are he, him. I had the honor of working alongside Safe Schools as one of the performers at the inaugural and most recent My Hollywood Pride in 2022 and 2023. I am so excited to get to speak to you all today, but specifically to the queer youth of South Florida. In a world where many of us have gotten to become ourselves in some of the most accepting times to be queer, many of you and fellow queer people in other states are being attacked by legislation targeting you, your families, your supporters, and your community for who you are. When I was 17, I was the first male cheerleader in 70 years at my high school, as well as the first openly queer homecoming king, winning in a wig, makeup, and women's fitted suit. I wore this as a political statement against the pushback I had received for simply being nominated on the court to begin with. My fellow classmates knew me for who I was, as many of your fellow classmates love and know you for who you are as well. They wanted to vote for somebody who represented their future. They wanted somebody to represent them. And I was that person. Nearly 4 years later, at age 21, as a queer musician, I am labeled as many different things. I, like many of you, fall under the category as someone who is labeled as gender nonconforming due to the way that they dress and carry themselves. Due to recent bills passed in places like Tennessee, someone who looks like me could be arrested for simply walking down the street due to the severity of the vagueness of these bills, as well as being in your home state of Florida. Due to bills like Don't Say Gay and Don't Say They, someone like me at 17 wouldn't be able to announce their identity the way that I was able to, let alone win homecoming king just as I did 4 short years ago. This is a direct attack at those of us who have found ourselves authentically from a younger age, as well as the generations of queer people and allies to the community who've helped build it from the ground up. It is important that I not only encourage you to continue to be yourself as authentically as you can be, but to also do it as safely as possible. If you are going out for a night with friends, make sure you go in groups. Share your location with them. Ask and make sure that the location you are going to is a queer-friendly space. Many will have pride-themed flags in the windows to signify allyship. Be aware of your surroundings. As common as it is to hear, it is always important to be perceptive about where you are at all times. But most importantly, speak with others about how you are feeling. Don't allow your fears for the state of the world to go unheard. Your fears, your feelings, and your experiences are all valid. The more you know on how things operate, the better you can do at managing how it makes you feel and how you react to it in your day-to-day life. Thank you so much to Safe Schools for having me. I'm so grateful that I got to share my little bit of insight and experience with you all. Have a great day.
Welcome back to our Rainbow Roundtable. I want to thank Joey Young for those inspiring words. And now, in this segment, we will focus on an often underappreciated aspect of our community, the drag community, and on how the current slate of anti-trans laws. We are honored to have Olivia Bergeron Oak, president of Spectrum at Nova University, with expertise in LGBTQ mental health and well-being. Olivia is joining us today to discuss the importance of protecting the drag community and our trans siblings from a psychological standpoint, and to provide an overview of the mental health effects that these laws have on children and young adults.
Yeah, so I think just to start with, a couple of statistics that are kind of scary to me include that trans youth are more likely to experience discrimination and violence. Trans youth are 4 times more likely to experience a mental health condition of some sort and are 9 times more likely to have attempted suicide in their lifetime than their heterosexual peers. We know for certain that having open policies in schools and having inclusive curriculum increase the mental health status of all students and decrease those suicide attempts, not only for our LGBTQ youth, but also for their classmates who are not in the community. So all of these laws that are coming out and across the country are really counterproductive to protecting our youth, despite what they claim. So these statistics are terrifying, and they kind of prove that this isn't really about protecting these children, and it's more about protecting the leaders who are proposing them and protecting them from their own fear. And so I think what's really important is providing spaces for these children to learn and to feel safe wherever we can. And the drag community is one of those places. And we have these there's all of these places where, like in libraries, drag queens are reading stories to children, and these stories are often about inclusion and respect and representation. And it's important that this continues because it provides this space for everyone to learn and for children to see themselves in these people who are adults and expressing themselves how they choose to. But it's also important for those who don't see themselves in those people because they need to learn that that's okay. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about the mental health. And I'm sure everyone else has some stories they want to share as well.
Yeah, it is amazing to me that there are some folks in our nation that would rather sit in a library and polish their AR-15 rifle and show that to kids than have a drag queen read them a children's story. And they're still dressed in drag in all of their, whatever conservative propaganda they want to put on, their whatever military gear they want to put on. That to me is drag, and they're doing the same exact thing, except they're utilizing a weapon of violence, and drag queens are just reading them kids' story.
Yeah, like I'm a young girl. I'm 20, and I'm going through school like as a trans female. And we are given the opportunity to undergo hormone therapy. So with that comes us having to go through puberty all over again. And I feel like we're being denied our creativity. We're being stripped of our voices. And it's like, that's not teaching like young adults to like be happy or to have growth. We're telling them to live under somebody else's standards, to stay in a box, not to grow. And it's like, I go to a Catholic school. And so like, I sometimes a lot get looked at weird. Just recently I was told that I shouldn't feel like alone in a sense because I was given a private room. And in such a sense, like it's like with these such laws happening, do we really care for these kids? Because I have to go to counseling because to feel less disencouraged, to not want to end it all because the world is just coming to something in such a bad place. What about these other young adults? Do y'all really care about them? You're stripping them of something you're who they really want to be. And me personally, I wouldn't want to live in a world where I'm not accepted. So it's like, do they really care? They don't care for real. They don't.
And as far as the mental health aspect, through my own experience, I always knew I was trans, but I lived in a time where you couldn't express it. And going back to that is really scary for me. I believe our kids need to express themselves. There are so many national organizations that say, gender affirming care for young people works. So how could that all be twisted in the state of Florida to miseducate people? And mental health is a big part of, I think, everybody's life, but more so when you're trans, because you're swimming against the grain of binaries and what's defined as male and female. So I think you push a lot of people's buttons as it pertains to their own sense and their own identity. So I feel like a lot of people feel threatened by that, and that's not our issue. So it's important to keep on getting mental health, continuing with hormones, if you're able to. It scares me some of these bills are saying that kids that are on hormones already won't be allowed to be on hormones past the end of this year. That's crazy. These kids, their brains have formed already. They're moving on to the progression. They're happy. They're not thinking about suicide. They're not thinking about what's wrong with me. So all these bills are going to just these kids are going to have like those cartoon bubbles. What's wrong with me? Do I deserve to be alive? Why am I here? Why does everybody hate me? And that turns into self-loathing. So trans kids are going to hate themselves as much as society says they should. This is a really scary epidemic with our trans youth.
Yeah, I think to villainize a child for any aspect of their identity is just such a horrendous thing for an adult to do. And I'm so grateful that there are supportive parents that do support their children in a transition. And part of, or at least one of the issues that our organization faces is just helping people access mental health care, and not just, which therapist your insurance covers, but which therapist is not a conversion therapist and as actually a gender affirming therapist. There's such a small amount that we feel comfortable recommending that it's really hard. And then the good providers are also fleeing states like Florida that are starting to criminalize medical care that is, like you said, Francesca, it's proven to help trans youth and trans adults to be able to access transition, and they don't want to allow doctors to do their job.
So like to piggyback off Ashley, I went to therapy on campus, and they recommended me a psychiatrist. And when I was talking to the psychiatrist, like within the first day, she didn't even know what a trans student was. So like the first day, she told me I had bipolar disorder. She like prescribed me 2 medications, not one.
Wow.
And was like, oh, you got to take this. And I started crying. She's like, why are you crying? And I'm like, I have bipolar disorder. You just told me I have bipolar disorder. So I'm like, I'm telling my coach and stuff like that. And my coach is like, yeah, I think you're crazy, but I don't think you're bipolar. So I'm like, okay. And so my best friend, who's like graduated as a nursing major, she said, if you take that medicine, you're gonna become a zombie. So come to find out, when I get gender affirming counseling at UM, I don't have bipolar disorder. It was just my estrogen. The injection was just altering my emotions very drastically, and that was the cause of sudden commotion and depression and stuff like that. So it's like, they don't have enough gender affirming care, like people to actually counsel us for real.
Right. And
Aaron, I think Aaron wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I was going to say, listening to everyone reminds me of when I was in my second year as a teacher, and high school teacher in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I'd been asked by some students to start a student-led gay straight alliance. I'd only been out about a year at that point, really didn't know how to sponsor a gay straight alliance, didn't want to touch that hot potato. They were asking me, and these students had asked year after year, and this is the third year in a row they were asking. So I didn't want to be another teacher who said no. We agreed to get the group going, and we had the planning meeting. I was big on it being student-led. Those 3 students planned the first meeting, and we'd mapped out that 10 to 12 students would come to the first meeting. And at the first meeting, we had 56 students and 9 teachers show up. And we were just blown away. And the thing I most remember, and it keeps echoing in my head listening to everyone, is how many students that day said, I thought I was the only one. And in some cases, that was because they thought they were LGBT. In some cases, they had a brother, a sister, a friend. There was a boyfriend-girlfriend couple who came because they were like, we're upset at the amount of anti-LGBT bullying we see, and we don't think that's okay, and we want a space to talk about those things. And then we had a feature called a spotlight, where students could literally, just someone would get it once per meeting, and they would get the floor to talk about who they were, why they were there. The shortest one ever was 2 minutes. The longest one ever was 57 minutes, but you had the floor. And there was a student one time, I'll call him Bernard, who wanted the spotlight, and he had been having some difficulties. And so I was like, oh my God, Bernard, this is early on when I'm still figuring out how to run a gay straight alliance. I was like, Bernard's going to have like a coming out story or something that explains the other difficulties. And Bernard goes to the friend room and just starts talking about how he came here from Haiti when he was 8 years old and he hadn't seen his mom. And he's talking about missing his mom. And I'm waiting for like the LGBT part, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And he gets to the end of the story, and it was all just about feeling alone and missing his mom. And a couple of the kids went up and hugged him. And in that moment, I realized this is so much bigger. This is the space that the straight Haitian student is now coming to talk about his feelings of adjusting to the United States, and everyone seeing how those feelings of isolation are linked. And the opposite of that, the feeling of being alone, a feeling like you're the only one, how damaging that is. And that's what these laws are creating. They want people to feel like they're the only one. I've heard, I believe this is still true, at least at the time, that just the presence of a gay straight alliance in a school dropped rates of suicidal ideation by 20%. whether or not you participated, right? And they don't want that. They want kids to be more at risk. They want kids to feel more alone, and it's terrible.
Thank you. A question that I have for all panelists. Are you worried about LGBTQ child suicide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, speaking personally, moved to Florida 3 years ago during the George Floyd era and coronavirus. So going to cosmetology school and then protesting for a year, and then immersing myself in the LGBTQ community of South Florida and everything. After 3 years, I'm tired. I'm ready to go. I'm going back home for my own mental health. I feel like I've been fighting a tsunami down here. I give 110% of my energy at protests. I involve myself as much as I can. I am a leader outside in public amongst my youth and my peers. But for my own sake and my own future and the own children and family I want to have, I have to leave Florida because me, myself, as youth, I'm tinkering out of it. Yeah. So for my own sake, yes.
I think that's exhausting.
And that's it's unfortunate that Florida has created that space for you to feel that way, because we're losing, not only are we losing your amazing authenticity, but we're losing the creativity that you could be, injecting into who we are as a state and who we are as a people here in Miami and South Florida. And I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. If I may say, also sharing, it also affects coming from the Bay Area, which has I really love the LGBTQ community I come from, everything. I want to say that I feel that it affects the youth and the peers of how we treat each other down here, with all this sense of isolation and competitiveness and just isolation. It doesn't make people come together as family. It doesn't make us want to be together as a community. It makes us see each other as other and treat each other as other. And when in the nightlife, which is a scene of which we can thrive in, because those bars are our safe zones, it's not familiarity of family. It's, oh, I see you. Yeah, we come from the same category, but you're not my family. And it's very strange to be in this state and me seeking community, me seeking family and loved ones from people who are brown and queer that look like me, and for them to treat me other because of how they feel in this state is very, very interesting. So that's my own experience.
And something that's really hard about these policies is it does create this unsafe space for all of us. And it's so hard to be so open all the time and to bring people in and to create communities, because we all feel like at any moment it could all turn very bad. And I know that this othering and ostracization is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I know that, I grew up in Florida. I've been here my whole life. And I never really had spaces to talk about any of this stuff. So I have felt other for my whole life. And I didn't know why, because we didn't have these discussions and we didn't have any of these spaces to learn about these things. And that's only going to get worse with these policies. And so it's terrifying to think of that either we're going to lose these people who are a part of our community and who could be voices for our community and who can just better the state because they are people who are amazing. We're going to lose them either because they're going to leave because they feel so unsafe, or we're going to lose them because they can't live anymore. And they feel they have to take their life in order to survive, which doesn't make sense, but it's the only way that the only path that they find that they have. And it's all due to this othering and this isolation that comes from this fear that has been created in this environment.
One of my courses of study at FIU, I got a specialized certificate in exile studies. FIU is one of the only universities in the world that actually offers this focused study. And I studied about other people being othered. And I was so excited that the queer community was overstepping, being caravanned out of our own state. but it's happening, and Sayer is an example of that. So the question is, how do we change the script? Not just everybody at this round table, how do allies, all other LGBTQ plus people across the state of Florida, the separation of the L, the G, the B, the T, that has to end now for all of us to group together and move forward. We can change this. We can. It's been proven in history. But we need to find a sustainable solution, because obviously other solutions have not been sustainable. And I think a lot of people just got too comfortable with the rights that we were given. And I think we have to demand full rite of passage, the same rights everybody else has. But we have to band together as a community, because if not, I could use a swear word, but I won't.
And I think, you know, we survey our clients that come in, and 70% of our trans clients report that they have experienced some kind of violence, whether it's psychological or physical, due to their gender identity. And if you spread that out to the, 50,000 or so trans people that just live in South Florida, that's tens of thousands of people that are carrying so much stored trauma and don't have the mental health access to deal with it. And I think it does lead to a lot of conflict, like big and small, within the LGBTQ community, even within the trans community. And we don't have a whole lot of skilled facilitators in conflict resolution here, right? So something allies can also do is help bring those skills into the community so that we can dig deeper and organize better, and learn how to move through some of the conflict. There's a tremendous amount of racism within the LGBTQ community down here that's just undealt with, and we need to face it if we're gonna be strong enough together.
Great. I think just like the pressure of constantly seeing these conversations taking place in the news, taking place in our spaces, it really creates this negative feedback loop that you're not safe anywhere. And that's just not right when there's so many other issues that we should be facing as a nation, as the world. I mean, our planet is falling apart. We have the violence that is not being spoken about. And yet here we are talking about drag queens and trans students who make up a very small portion of the population. Why are you putting a stumbling block in front of these people, in front of like children? And that, from a spiritual perspective, one of the few things that Jesus had an issue with as a Christian was putting stumbling blocks in front of children. That is not right. And these people that claim to follow Jesus, follow a certain kind of faith, they're doing exactly what they were told not to do.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.